Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Titusville Community Redevelopment Agency meeting of December 11th at 5:30. Call this meeting to order. We do have a quorum. I don't see anybody in the audience to say an invocation, so please join me in a moment of silence. Please join me in the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item is approval of minutes. Somebody would like to do that?
I'd move to approve the minutes of the CRA meeting on November 13th.
A second.
With one addition, I believe they called Mr. Diesel.
That's on the city council.
I thought it was on both. It's just on the one? Okay. Okay, then I'll leave it.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Passes unanimously. We have no special recognitions. We have no old business, new business. Mr. City Manager.
At the November 13, 2018 CRA meeting, Member Leedy requested that a special event handicap parking item that was part of the November Executive Director's Report be placed on the December CRA meeting agenda for discussion. And it is here.
Okay. Does any member I see Mr. Leedy, go right in. May I ask on this one, this is the third time we've spoke about this issue. I think we ought to be able to do it with each person having 2 shots at the apple and try and keep it as brief as possible. Go ahead, Mr. Leedy.
Yeah, I thought I'd chime in considering I asked to put it on the agenda. Just a quick history of this. This goes back a couple years, and it goes back not only the CRA, but I think we did it, there was discussions at the city council. I remember Member Long and the former mayor were interested in this subject. What this relates to and what I've been trying to get this in front of our group, and that is, people have come to me during special events, not complaining, but asking for some more handicap parking. And I'm talking special events only. And the cities, rightly so, has made some arguments that they don't want to. We're not talking about something out on the street. We're talking about, what I'm talking about for your consideration is getting 4 or 5 or 6, I don't know how many, but of those temporary kind of plastic rubber things that we have somebody put up before the special event and put them in 4, 5, 6 parking places of public parking, whether it's Julia Court or over by the Welcome Center, and add this to the handicap. I think 2 things. One, I think it's needed, and number 2, it's not an expensive thing to do. And I think the other thing is it just shows that the city is concerned and is trying to support that. I leave this for your consideration and will ask, I thank Peggy Basaka for doing some of the things that I asked her to help me with. I might be off by 1 or 2, but as you recall, about 2 months ago we had that, she gave that presentation of the entire CRA and how that fit in with with like Walmart and the area we're talking, Walmart has 2 more handicap parking at its facility than the entire CRA.
I'm not
So-
sure how you relate the two.
I'm just doing the count. Just that, you think of the entire area of the CRA versus Walmart, and Walmart's got a little bit more. My point is that I'm just trying to see if I can get support from the CRA to get these. I've seen them also at sporting events. They're not permanent. I think all of you maybe have seen them or haven't noticed. I mean, they're just plastic poles or rubberized poles with a handicap. And we put those up in 5 or 6 just regular parking areas for the event, take them down the next day.
And where was that, sir? Was that in Florida or?
I've seen it in
Titusville?
Florida. I've seen it at stadiums. I've seen it at some concerts. So that's what this subject's about. And I also realize that we have to have somebody do that, and we'd have to buy the signs, but it just seems to me that's a reasonable thing to ask. So.
You go ahead.
So-
Mayor, if I could,
Yes, sir.
the city has essentially gotten out of the special events business. We now sponsor Martin Luther King, the Christmas parade, and the 4th of July. So we really aren't doing any special events in the CRA right now.
Okay.
So I was curious, do we know how many handicap parking spaces we have, say, in Julia, behind the stores?
They did a study on that.
I know they did.
And I think you've got the numbers because you
Do you have
just,
the numbers?
I didn't bring them tonight, but I know that it was somehow 16 or something. I don't know.
It's 14 or 16. That includes fire headquarters and City Hall. We own 4 public parking lots downtown.
So total of 14 to 16, City Hall, Julia Street, behind the stores?
The Commons and fire headquarters.
Okay.
So Julia Street was overdone for handicap. We put access to the sidewalk system, which wasn't required. So if you notice, there are, as the sidewalks exit the lot, we added handicap ramps at that location. That was in addition to Pritchard House at the time.
Okay.
So
Are we noticing that all the handicap spots are used during events, or do we know?
I don't. I mean, I can tell you that most events, a lot of them shut down Julia Street, which wipes out 4 hours.
Okay.
Most people will not park at fire headquarters, given that it's a fire station. I don't know how many people will park at City Hall, being that some of our handicap parking is on the south side. But yeah,
Okay.
we don't have other public lots, so the Commons is our primary public lot that's open. So that's really all we have. We don't own any other parking lots in that area to enhance.
Okay.
And as you enhance handicap, you remove regular. So, and you may trade 2 for 1. So that's just the trade out. So if the merchants that do the events see the need, they can always ask to do that in one of our parking lots. They could ask the private property owners to allow them to use their parking lots for that purpose. So they have some options. They could carve out part of Julia Street to use for that purpose specifically. It would just be rearranging how they handle the event.
And my guess is if they needed to use Wells Fargo, they could use that also. And you
Yeah, I
have
would
Broad
assume.
Street too.
Yeah.
plenty of parking.
Mm-hmm.
over
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
there. I live on Broad Street. I mean, there's plenty of parking over there and in the Wells Fargo. It's, you know, for shots and things like that, that area is front row. So they get very crowded at that point, but not for the Friday events or anything. So. Any other comments? I see none, Mr. Leedy. I don't think there's any pressing need for it. Thank you, sir. Next item, Mr. City Manager.
Yes, sir. At their 13 November 2018 meeting, the CRA requested a recap review of previous regional stormwater studies for the downtown, beginning with the Kimberly Horn Associates Master Drainage Study from 2010. A summary of these studies and work is included in your packet.
Any comments from council, from CRA members, rather? Correct. Oh, two members. Member Ball, I'm sorry.
Well, now we're down on this end. Since I asked for this item, and I think that, is staff got any other comments to make to the material that was provided? Let me just say I appreciate the inch or so of technical detail that was provided. And I did look it all over, and I'll be the first one to confess it didn't mean a whole lot to me in trying to determine. I know that the essence of that study was to evaluate the different basins that affect the CRA district and the flow rates, and looking at them under different hypothetical flood events and that sort of thing. What was not there, and I was sort of alluding to, is it appears that about 2010, and maybe there was some activity afterwards, we sort of just put on the shelf any effort to define a stormwater management plan expressly for the issues in the CRA. So I don't know if staff wants to speak to the number of studies and kind of where we left things. And I perhaps had hoped that there might be a little more guidance from staff, perspective on where we should go. Keeping in mind that the original thing that caused the question to come up were questions about the stormwater treatment at the new beach wave project, and was that going to be good enough for the Indian River Lagoon, and a sense that we're going to be encountering those kind of questions over and over again. So I want to give staff a chance to respond to that.
Okay. Well, specific to Beach Wave, part of the challenges for Beach Wave was they developed below one of our stormwater improvements. We have an alum treatment facility built at Spaceview Park, but the point they're tying in is after the treatment process. So they trigger treatment on their own, or they can try to pipe above us. Probably cost you less to build the swell than it will to pipe up the road and tie it back in above our diverters. What they do benefit from is because they essentially directly outfall the river, they won't have to deal with stormwater quantity. The amount of water they put off, because you can't overflow the river, they'd be held harmless for the most part. So I think they're going to have a decently easy permitting process for stormwater for St. John's. They're smaller sites, so they fall upon a special permitting regulation that called a 10-2 that DEP regulates. Engineers can do the plans, turn them in, and they print the permit immediately. So they're already going through that process, but going back to the studies, the Kimberly Horn study, what was provided is a lot of ICPR coding. So unless you really want to go through massive amounts of numbers in those basins, 400 pages of that is kind of not anything you want to go through. Kimberly Horn did run all the basins to try to pick them up. We had an inventory done 2-3 years ago that refined our basins a little better graphically. They didn't move forward past looking at the existing basins and to making improvements. As you mentioned, 2013, Geosyntec was an RFP recipient, currently one of our contracts that we have continuing service for stormwater. That project started under CDBG funding. It was determined CDBG could not pay for it. They can pay for some of the improvements. They couldn't pay for the study. So at the time, it was asked whether a stormwater utility could pay for it, because this is the benefit of development. The utility doesn't pay for that. So obviously, at that time, the CRA didn't also have the funds to pay for it. So that study fell without being awarded. I will tell you that both consultants looked at improvements across the railroad tracks as well, which takes them out of the CRA district.
Okay, and I know we had a chance to chat very briefly before the start of the meeting, but for the benefit of the rest of the members and for my slowness in grasping that there is no problem, I'd like to ask you just a couple of questions, and that one would be, how does the CRA with its own bound. How do we fit into the overall city approach to stormwater management? And are we part of it, or do we have to kind of deal with it as a separate entity?
No, from the stormwater utility standpoint, the CRA is just additional basins are actually part of bigger basins that fall from outside. For instance, the Main Street Basin stretches way beyond the CRA, so does the South Streets. CRA does have a number of small basins like the Commons and others that have minimal amount of water coming out. But they are part of the overreaching because the basins carry much further than the CRA. For instance, the St. John's Basin that flows through the CRA goes all the way back to the Senior Center, which is nearly on the other side of town, almost outside of 4 or 5. So they fit within the aspect of that. So they've had, the CRA basins have had water quality improvements, efforts to clear up for TMDL purposes the maximum daily loads on the river. We completed Main Street recently this year. We've covered up St. John's and made a second improvement to it. The alum injection pond treats a large basin that flows most of Garden Street. So they fit within that side of it. Now, we do not have within the utility the plan to build regional ponds that will benefit property development. The utility wouldn't want to expend money to benefit developers, especially not unless we're talking about paybacks and things, which even in a CRA you probably would want to think about. If you're going to do it for development, you should maybe want to make them pay for it, because technically development is paying for itself. What I did share before is if you take, for instance, our site here, if it were to be redeveloped, you get to credit everything that's on it today. So all the impervious area, you start at from the minute 1, and you get 4,000 square feet above that before St. John's stormwater even triggers. Actually, the city triggers at 1,000 square feet. So you wouldn't have a pond come into play until you got to that point for a quantity standpoint. No matter what you do in this area, the St. John's will require a quality treatment. This is a TMDL listed area for the Indian River side, not the St. John's. It will come at some point. So they will require it. Baffle boxes, I believe Beach Wave is actually going to put in some sort of baffle box treatment, maybe not the kind we use, but something similar. So you'll see that. What we haven't seen yet from my standpoint is I haven't seen a permit issued above one of our baffle boxes yet to see how St. John's treats it, if they say the baffle box are doing the job or not. You can probably make the case of that, but I think any site, especially the ones that are redeveloped, which a lot of the CRA properties are, they benefit from having a impacted site already. Now, if you go to a flat, empty field, which is what Beach Wave did, you are going to have new challenges because you don't have any starting point. You're starting in a flat, empty field. So there's, a little bit the codes and regulations help redevelopment more than they help a flat development.
Well, I think our objective is, and I'll speak for me, it is both the economic development that can be enabled by trying to address stormwater management if it becomes an impediment by requiring that it be done on a piecemeal basis on each and every parcel that's going to get developed. And I understand that there's maybe credits for existing impervious and all that kind of stuff. But the second objective, and they actually go hand in hand, is environmental stewardship. And what can we do by treating that to foster economic development that at the same time is going to improve the quality of the stormwater discharge that eventually is going to make its way to the river. So, I'm just going back to where I left off back in 2010 on my last tour of duty, and I'm
We're
reading.
still glad to have you back.
I'm reading a significant challenge to the city's vision for the downtown and its existing stormwater management system. Current regulations require downtown properties to provide individual on-site retention methods, with a large portion of each lot being dedicated to stormwater and parking. There's little room left to build an economically viable structure. This has created the need for multiple variances on properties and a lack of development, blah, blah, blah. Maybe I asked the wrong question. So if I can kind of see the summary and a recap of what studies have been done and that we stopped, and maybe it's okay that we stopped, but maybe the question should have been to get staff to provide us a summary report of a couple of pages on why this is not a problem, and we shouldn't worry about the quality of what's going into the Indian River Lagoon because it's going to all be taken care of.
Would you like to ask for that?
I would.
Okay, is there any-
I'll make that a motion, as a matter of fact. That we,
Do I have a second to his motion?
You have a second. Kevin Scope.
Motion.
I don't know.
I'll call you into discussion.
Okay, that's fine.
You're on.
Okay, as we talk about water quality, if we'd like, we can share our TMDL studies. We have lots of them. We've been under TMDL now for a 6-year cycle, and we completed our first required cycle, and we're well past our second goal. Those studies are not specific to we actually are treating these basins because they're super big, so we've already treated them. Development, because the TMDL process started on a date. Everything past that date will have to meet the same regulations that we had to meet. So when you go to build any store, anything, any subdivision in the city of Titusville, or anywhere else within the Indian River Basin, you have to currently build to meet your TMDLs. So they will build a infrastructure that will, by law, take it down to an empty field from a nitrogen and phosphorus standpoint, which are the only 2 things that are in the TMDL. So from a quality standpoint, we can share the studies if you'd like to see them. We already have them. We can share what we've done. I know we published it a number of times. So we can provide that. I think what might be, not to put words, I think what you're thinking of is building a regional pond and economic development incentive. I will share with you, the city of Vito did this recently. They permitted a master pond that was intended to develop around it, city-owned property. And they are using that as an economic development tool because it is I don't know how they're handling the financial side, but they are using it to feed development. So they're offsetting what would have been on a development site into their own facility. Unfortunately, the city doesn't own any ponds. We own ponds, but the pond is an alum injection pond that's not made for water quantity.
well, I think that it's not so much the technical content of studies that have been done, because we know the city's obligated and will work, to ensure that its own standards and St. Johns River Water Management District standards are going to be met. The question's more to the point of, is there merits to look at a more comprehensive or a downtown-wide sort of set of approaches that may accomplish both, improvements in the water quality and maybe encourage a little bit more readily the development of parcels. And I believe it's sort of a multidisciplinary question. It's not just public works, or it gets to the other elements of city planning and our broad goals of both development plus, worrying about things like future, increases in stormwater caused by climate change. It may increase the amount of, it's not about just the water rising, it's about increased levels of rainfall and such. So, or you can write us a report saying, don't lose sleep, we don't have any problems.
Yeah, but when we talk about creating a improvement that will serve property, one of the challenges that I can share that if I were to look at it as a consultant is, if I look at the CRA and I have 12 to 13 basins in varying sizes, varying degrees, varying locations, and if I ask that consultant to go find me an improvement, they're going to struggle when there's that many basins and that many models you have to run, and the price will go exponentially higher. So I think when we looked at for Tim, we were looking in the 150 range just to redo what had already been attempted by Geosyntec. So, and that was not going to be a specific one. So as we talk about it, there could be some more specificity to it. But then that also raises, when I'll share from a previous city, once you start talking about making specific improvements to other people's properties, those properties become a more valuable asset for that person to sell. Where I worked previously, we built an interstate and we increased property sales to ourselves by planning it the way we did. So that's some of the challenges that go in that concept. And you're right, it is more, it honestly is not more, stormwater is more planning oriented, because it would be a district-wide look at what goes where and where can a pond take it.
Well, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just thinking that we could start before we went out and hired a consultant with an in-house scrub of the issue. And maybe it's get staff together and see what kind of, report. And I'm not looking for 2 inches of technical detail. Just tell us, where we should consider this to be an issue or that it's a non-issue of dealing with. We have many parcels in the downtown that have not been developed, many that are looking at potentially being redeveloped, parcels that will be accumulated perhaps, property assembly by somebody that wants to build a bigger project. And sooner or later, we'll be back here with a question about stormwater management on a particular project. And as you remember, we had the one waiver that we had spent all our time discussing was the waiver related to stormwater standards. And there was some division within city staff over whether that, initially, over whether that was the right answer. And we went ahead and did it, because we were convinced that the standards were all going to be met on that site. So is there confusion at all about what we're asking or what I'm asking for?
Before you ask.
I know I asked for a recap,
Recap,
just to get a reset, because I've been asleep for 10 years on this issue.
Is that it?
I'm good.
Okay, Member Nelson?
I was just going to agree with Member Ball, and by the way, I had the same problem reading all those numbers. That was way past me. But I would like to have an idea of what we can or cannot do and what might be appropriate in that area. So I likewise would like to have some ideas on what we can do.
Member Leedy?
I agree with everything that's said, and I'm just sitting here saying that, listening to you, you're trying to get ahead of the curve a little bit here. I'd like to, I don't know if it takes a friendly amendment, but if they can add a paragraph, not just CRA, but how does that one paragraph relate to the city? And is the city council engaged in this right now? And then number two, just because I don't know, and it, is there a political thing that could happen in a sense that, and I don't know how this law is made and how, where next January the legislature tells St. John's, do this all along the Indian River, and it hits Titusville with a $3 million, price tag. Is there someone that can do that to us? Is there any political winds that are people wanting this kind of?
Do either of you want to answer that?
Well, I don't think it's unreasonable, because I've seen some cities been hit with.
But there was actions taken where the legislature.
I mean,
I'm
is
sorry,
there some?
sir.
Is there some coming?
Sir?
More action?
Sir, I was going to try and answer your question. Am I not allowed to
No, I'm
partake in
asking
the
the staff,
conversation?
sir.
They just shook their head that
I
they didn't
didn't-
know.
Never mind.
Staff, do you want to discuss it? I
Sure.
thought, I was just trying to give him some information. If you have further
Understood.
information, please do.
I think the fear is if the largest impact to the Inver Lagoon from a financial standpoint for the stormwater utilities in this county has been the implementation of the TMDL program. That was not a legislative item, that was the Department of Environmental Protection, protecting a water body. Their TMDLs, I think they're up to 16 in the state of Florida now. They protect everything from the springs to rivers. There are probably another 10 on the books coming. The current TMDL numbers we have been in effect for 6 years. They're likely to stay in effect for at least another 12. At that time, the TMDL will expire, and we are expected to have met that requirement. No one's challenged and no one has tried to see what happens when you don't meet that requirement.
Right.
Because none of the utilities and the Save Lagoon funds or anything else are really gearing up to say we're not going to meet the targets that are set for us. So I do not see a forthcoming environmental change from DEP because they have expended a large amount of money to set these TMDLs in place to meet the goals of the Indian River. So I don't see where, and again, that was not a legislative action, that was the environmental protection coming forward saying this is what needs to happen because our lagoon's in bad shape. So
Yeah, I didn't mean to be specific about the legislator, but any authority higher than the city that could, and if you could put a footnote or something like that so we could read about what that, just so, it's just for knowledge to understand what's the current thinking on
That's-
this, and, because I don't know.
Are you through, sir?
Yep.
I was trying to answer your second question about the state coming, and there was discussion, I believe, legislature a few years about unfunded mandates not coming from the state to cities or counties. So there is some admonition to the legislature to say you just can't spring $3 million or whatever on a particular area without helping fund it, or at least funding it or helping fund it. Member Stokel?
This may be jumping ahead, but I just noticed on our next agenda item as one of the possible budget items, it says the stormwater plan. I was just wondering, does that relate at all to this type of discussion? Or what?
I think the intent was that discussion. Yeah.
So would that be something potentially, if we are wanting kind of what this discussion is saying, is that something that we would potentially want to fund to help with this? Or is this something totally separate?
No, it was intended to cover this discussion.
Okay,
It was chosen to be funded.
okay, gotcha, thank you.
Vice Mayor?
I'm just convinced more now than ever. I just need a little summary of what the heck's going on. I think that the questions brought up in the last two meetings have been in great depth, and I kind of lean on you for that. I really feel like that's something you're very involved with, and I'm listening a lot. And now we looked at the next item, as Member Stokel pointed out. There's some discussion on basin stormwater plan, and I think this may be a couple-page summary, as was put previously. Do we have a problem? No, we're good. And that would make it, easy. Because again, I looked at those numbers for about 5 minutes and I'm over my head. So I appreciate what you guys are doing. And I know you may be feeling like, gosh, this is redundant. We're doing this again. I guess I'm just looking for you, just a couple paragraphs of we're good or we need to do some stuff. And thank you.
I see no other lights. We have a motion and a second. Any further comments, discussion anybody would like to make? If not, all those in favor say yes.
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 Any opposed, like sign, passes unanimously. Next item, Mr. City Manager, C. CRA
During the
fund.
CRA grant application discussion on November 13, 2018, CRA members and staff discussed the current available funding in the restricted fund balance account. Staff was directed to report back at the December CRA meeting to discuss how the CRA might choose to use the funds that are available. After the approved budget amendment of $27,700 for the CRA grant applications, a total of $170,604 is available to appropriate to CRA projects. Staff has provided you a list of possible projects as well as the current FY funding for those particular projects.
I guess we'll start at the beginning here. Sidewalk infill. Anybody have any comments on that? We have $41,000 delegated to that.
Mayor, I failed to add something. Kevin, can you talk about the solar stuff? Just yesterday, we got the quote back on the solar for the Welcome Center. And it came back with an option to put a solar covered area within Julia parking lot. So I'd let Kevin describe the two options that are available and the cost of each, because I would like that to be
That's
part of this
fine. Go
discussion
ahead.
as well.
Well, the base system is a roof-mounted system that met the minimum spec, and it was around, I believe, $8,000, and we're paying for that out of our CRA maintenance funds for the building. So the contractor came with two additional options. One was do just an enhanced system on the roof that covered up more of the roof. We'd asked for a minimum standard, like 5,000 kilowatt. He was taking up to 9.5. The third option he offered, the contractor did, was for about $195,000 to add, essentially covering 2 rows of the parking in Julia Street to bring a robust solar system online. They would have a structure, solar panels mounted on top of, in addition to what's on the building. They would go between our light poles that are already there with a secondary structure covering the parking spaces in between the two light poles. So this was offered up. Any solar system backfeeds FPL, so power bills go down, so forth. So that was kind of, we had specified a minimum standard. They met it, gave us options above the minimum standard. Currently, we chose the lowest option with our funding and brought this as an option for additional
You
funding.
chose which one? I'm sorry.
We chose the lowest amount, the minimum standard one.
Which is $8,000.
Yeah, on the welcome center
But we wanted to make sure the CRA board knew that there were additional options that are available at an additional expense. And the Cadillac, if you will, that actually will run the complete welcome center's electricity is $190,000.
Member Stokel.
Yep. Did you guys, with these options, were you able to calculate cost savings at all per year of how much we would be able to save with the 3 different options?
I think we have the buyback numbers on them, so where they pay down the bills. I think smallest was pushing 14 years. It was right at the limit of the lifespan of the panels.
Okay.
Larger system obviously comes down drastically, faster payback. So, like I said, we went into it, we asked for a minimum standard. That was where we
Right.
started. And really the contractor did it, took this third standard as his own and looking at the entire area and built, he presented it as a feature project to add for solar.
So the lowest option is the 8,000. What was the middle option? How much?
I believe it was around 17, if I recall.
Okay. And then the 190,000.
Yeah, and we've already executed the lowest one, so that's already in process of being done.
That's coming out of our existing CRA budget or this additional?
No, that was
one-time?
within the existing, we have a maintenance
Okay.
fund we use for the CRA that pays for mulch and replacing things. And we had enough in it to pay for
Okay.
this welcome center item.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair.
Pushing the wrong button. Along the same lines there with lighting, which I think certainly I'd like to consider that as part of what we're going to do. I'm glad that came along before this meeting. Something that I don't see on the list here, and I could be missing it, is lighting itself in the CRA area. I don't think we've ever had a meeting like this where we talk about what can we do, where I don't speak about lighting. I think where Member Leedy apparently hears a lot about handicap parking issues. I hear a lot about lighting. I don't hear that there's not enough parking in downtown. I hear there's not enough lighted parking where people, elderly especially, but including myself, feel like, a little more visibility, a little more safety and visibility. But quite honestly, in my own life, I struggle sometimes with the depth perception of things when the light is not good. So I'm just kind of looking to see if there's an option for some lighting in the CRA area.
Tim just reminded me, I think the current budget had some money in it for adding enhancements to the FPL system. You may not, I don't know if we brought it up, but you may not know that the FPL is currently converting their lighting infrastructure to LEDs. Part of that process is they don't want to do a lot of wattage increasing because the lights are going to change color. So a white light shows up different, so what they suggested is don't come and ask us to change out wattage on their lights today because once it goes LED, it's going to look different and it may be a lot brighter than you think. So we have that money set aside for it. So we do have that. We certainly can come back and we have priced out in the past. We've looked at lighting for Main Street in the past. So we can go back and look at that again. It would be very similar to the Commons light setup, if I had to guess, the ones we just put in. So
In this setting with this funding, from what you're saying with FPL, who would want to put us on hold right now, I would be best not to move into lighting right now?
They're already in process of changing all of their lighting to LED. So we have money set aside to do that now.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Member Ball.
I went about this slightly different than starting at the top and going down, and it's because I tried in my mind to sort of prioritize, across these categories. And the one thing that struck me, and staff will have to correct me if I'm wrong, but that the 170,000 and change is all the resource we have to appropriate before we get through this entire fiscal year.
This is additional money
Right.
that was not budgeted. So we have our budget already formed, and then when we got our actual numbers in, the numbers were higher than what we budgeted. So
But
these are add-on projects.
But we're not anticipating any additional revenue, TIF revenue until we get to October 1st, 2019. Is that correct? So the first thing I thought is that by, if it makes sense to the rest of you, is we might want to set aside a reserve for the grant program funding, because that incentivizes even more money. So if we have resources that somebody walks in the door and says, I got a great, facade grant project, it's going to be $40,000. If we commit all of this to other projects, and we're just at, we'll say, come back in October of 2019, we'll have more money to talk to you. And I just notionally was thinking like half, but it can be 40%, it can be whatever. And then from there on, it's a matter of just saying, pick the projects that seem like they have priorities. And until we hear from staff on the stormwater plan, I don't want to commit a lot of money to that, and we might even want to look at stretching that over a couple of years. So I probably would fall to sidewalk infill, lighting if it made sense. That's a good add, and back up from there. But anyway, that was the first one I wanted to put on the table just for discussion, is the idea of reserving some percentage of this available money for what we don't know is going to come in the door.
Member Jordan.
First, I have to ask a question. I'm so happy that I'm new here, so I can ask questions that maybe others want to ask, but they want to look smart. Anyway, can someone explain to me what's the demographics? I shouldn't say demographic. What is the geographical area we are talking about as far as the CRA is concerned?
The CRA is, if you can picture the railroad tracks to the west,
Okay.
Buffalo Road and the marina to the north, and Grace Street to the south is where the one-way pairs of US 1 begin at the south end, and then the Indian River Lagoon on the east side. So basically from Grace Street up to Buffalo, east of the railroad tracks.
Okay. Based on that, of course, I love technology, and when you start talking about solar, I'm really into that. But I'm with Vice Mayor Diesel. I'm getting a little old, and it's hard for me to see. It seems, in my mind, it seems when I'm driving along that the city is dark. And I just think that, with light comes life. And we really need to do something. And I know LED lights. I try to replace everything I have with LED lights because it's a different color for sure. So I'm really into us enhancing any CRA area that we can with LED lights. Now, saying that, I'm a little disappointed because I can't stand the way those lights are that FBL has in the center median all through US 1. It's just ugly to me. We really need to do something with that, but that's not part of the CRA proper.
Yes, sir. That project is on the books, and it's one of the $12 million that we're short of
I understand. Yeah, I just want to bring that up because I think, we want to be an inviting city, and to me, that's one of the ugliest part of the city is the light poles that we have in the center and the wires and all that. We really need to do something about that. So I do have a question about the sidewalks. We were talking about $50,000 for sidewalks. How many linear feet are we talking about that we can redo?
We have 41,000 currently dedicated to sidewalk infill.
That's $41,000.
Yes, sir.
No, I'm saying how many linear feet of sidewalk can we do with the $50,000 that you have here?
I think you're mixing up the second item is concrete street repair for $50,000.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're
Yes, sir.
right. Right. Okay. But then I see, okay, the infill is $41,000. So that's just hit and miss We just go and we find the areas that are
Yes,
damaged
sir.
and
We,
then
we,
you,
we connect the area or we repair a broken sidewalk.
so do we know how many linear feet of that is, that we can do, or
I
that's
don't
just
have
gonna
that
be?
number. Yeah, Kevin just stepped out. I don't
Yeah,
have that
Kevin
number.
just stepped out, but it would be obviously a smaller proportion of what the total would be.
I mean, once we do that, if we spend $41,000, where are we when we're done? What's gonna be the
You're
the
still,
result?
by staff estimate, you're 160,000 short of completing the project.
So if you take a
So
percentage,
a quarter is what we can deal with right now, right?
You've already budgeted 41,
All right?
and staff says that in order to fix the
Oh, I'm
broken
sorry.
items that we
I
have.
get it. I
Okay.
finally got
Okay,
it.
sir.
I was a little slow, but I got it now. I usually catch up, so. Okay, so we could put some of the money into the sidewalk project, just a question of how much we want to do,
That's correct.
right? So we've got $170,000 that we didn't know we were going to have, and this is not in any kind of order that you have it here. It's just, well, I'm into lights, so that's my first priority for sure. I like to see where I'm going. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Member Nelson.
I need to double check what I'm understanding, Mr. Luis. Maybe you can do this. So we have $8,000 for the solar on the Welcome Center, correct?
It's already in your budget.
That's already in the budget. And there was an in-between 17,000, which would be for what?
You would add an additional 17,000. That's to put additional panels on the building.
Okay. And do we know how much electricity that would produce?
The $8,000 is the minimum,
Okay.
and then there's incremental increases based on the two the additional options.
Okay. So this would be my suggestion to our group, is that we go ahead and do 17,000 for the solar and split the rest, one-third, 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 between the sidewalks, the grant, and the street resurfacing. Because I think that would give us a really good leg up on the street repair and the sidewalks and give us some additional funds in the grant program.
Say that again, just the numbers.
So 17,000
Yeah.
for the increased solar system. Sorry. And then split the remainder, one-third to the sidewalks, sidewalk infill, one-third to the concrete street repair, and one-third to the grant program,
Of the 170 you're talking about?
minus the 17.
Yes, okay.
So it'd be about $52,000, $53,000 for each.
I beg, I'm writing while you're saying it. The very last one, I don't have down yet.
Which part?
One-third to the streets, sidewalk, yeah.
And the grants.
So that gives you $51,000 for the three items.
Okay.
Each one of the items is 51,000, I'm sorry.
Okay. I counted on somebody else to do the math for me. Thank you.
Member Leedy.
Can't add and subtract.
Mr. Ford, do we have, under the grant program, any applications now?
no, we do not. We have had some feelers, and I have told them that there is no money, all the money has been earmarked, and that it would be up to the board to determine if they would make any more money available during this fiscal year or have to wait until October 1st for the next fiscal year.
I agree with, I like your formula. But I agree with Member Ball. The reason I ask that, because that could go out the door in the next month. I mean, you do have some feelers, and I'm just kind of sitting here thinking, is $50,000 enough? I mean, that could be gone next month, and then we're back to, we have nothing in reserve again. So I mean, like I said, I like the 51, 51, 51, 17, but it wouldn't hurt my feelings if it was 100, 51, and 17. I mean, because it sounds like we might send that out the door pretty quick. Is that right, Mr. Ford?
It would all depend on the project. The
No, I
one
understand
feeler
that,
that I
sure.
have is a smaller, probably most likely a smaller grant, but that doesn't mean that somebody else could come in and ask for a, be a much bigger project. So, 50,000 is typically the max for most of the grants, unless it was we increased the additional 50 for the infill, for the mixed use, where they go up to 100,000. So obviously there wouldn't be enough money for that. But
Yeah. Executive Director, could we do this? Could we say, would it put cause a problem if we said, okay, let's do 51 for streets, 51 for grant, and 51 out here in abeyance for a couple months, and let's revisit it again and see if we need that backup, or then allocate it to streets or something. Could we do something like that?
You sure can. It's up to
Well, what I'm
CRA
trying to say
decide.
is that we may, in a couple months, the 51,000 may be gone for the grant program, and we may want to revisit that and do it again, or we may want to commit it to streets or something else.
I think the point that the city we can do anything, Member Leedy, that the council agrees on, certainly, but they may not all agree on that particular way of doing it, and you would be cutting out the sidewalk, which we had already kind of.
No, I was thinking of cutting out the street. I'd do the sidewalk, 51,000 for the grant program.
Okay, then you're cutting out the street.
And then 51,000, revisit it in February, and 17,000 for the lights.
I believe
Okay.
17,000 was for solar.
Yeah, yeah.
We can do that if everybody's in agreement. I don't think everybody has spoken, so I would just reserve that thought until we hear from everybody. Member Stokel.
I actually was kind of leaning in that direction. I wanted to know more about this street repair. Do we typically do 50,000 per year for street repair, and what would this additional?
No, what you've allocated in street repair right now is 150,000 to do Palm Avenue, the complete Palm Avenue. There's some connector streets that are, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
are you asking about
Yeah, that's where
concrete
I'm
streets or
wondering which
regular
one-
streets?
The concrete
The
street.
concrete
so,
streets.
so the
Yes.
concrete is a 50,000 a year that we do every year.
Okay.
And what you would be purchasing if you choose to do an additional, you're going to do another square of the concrete.
Or what has happened too, in order to make a bigger impact in the concrete area, to make it more feasible for a contractor, they've been holding off on the 50,000, letting it carry over, getting another 50, and then doing 100,000 at a time to do intersections and things of that nature.
Okay.
Because at 50,000, that's just a very small, very area of the road, of the concrete road area.
Okay. And then our light discussion, because I'm kind of in agreement as well. Is that something we should be looking at potentially allocating out money for, or is it your recommendation that we wait for next fiscal year based on what FPL is doing currently?
Well, you're going to get FPL to do
Okay.
this project, and I would say there is a need for additional lighting if you want to allocate some money for additional lighting.
Okay.
Main Street is a perfect example. It's dark.
Do we know any price estimates on that?
Nope.
Okay. So I would agree again with Member Ball. Grant program, I'm there at least 50,000. I kind of like the idea, honestly, to maybe have that 50,000 kind of set aside. Should we already run out of that grant money come February that we could use, or potentially put it back to street repair, or potentially for some lighting as we kind of get to that point? I know it's not ideal. But I'm definitely for the grant program, at least 50,000. I like the idea of doing the additional solar, that 17,000. I think we're going to start seeing that push there and us getting it paying for itself essentially. And then I'm kind of flexible on what you guys want to do with the remainder.
Member Jordan.
Still trying to understand the $50,000, and you said do a block. What does that
Okay,
mean?
so this area is over in the historic district where you have coquina that's mixed with concrete.
Right.
And so in order to match the color and all that, it's $50,000 for about one of the squares. You know how concrete has? Yeah, that's about what it costs us to do.
Wow.
No, it's
We've done,
a lot wider than he indicated. No, just go down there. It's, I don't know, 20, 30 feet, somewhere in there.
yeah, the intersections were the last two that have been
Yeah, I'm
done.
just talking
And
about the
and they basically, the whole intersection was done for just under $100,000.
Is that really needed?
There's different opinions on that street.
Okay.
Mr. Ball, you might want to.
I'm happy to address it. I was going to address it when it came back to me, but
We're on it now, you might as well
at
go.
the risk of irritating some of my neighbors or having them applaud, I would say this is not an urgent project. I drive the street every day. It's just fine. Some people like it this way because it calms traffic. Some people don't like it. But I was not going to put, if I was prioritizing, I'd put this at the very bottom and just tell you, it's not urgent. There's other things we can do that have better impact, in my opinion.
Okay, I'm glad you said that because, you know, my focus is if we've got extra money, then we should show the people that we're trying to enhance the city. And if it's not needed, then I'm saying put that at the bottom of the list, and let's do some things that people can see us actually being proactive with. So the solar, to me, is a really good idea. We do have sidewalk problems for sure, places where sidewalks need to be, so I certainly want to do that. Mr. Member Ball, I was trying to understand, were you only talking about grants as far as putting more in reserve for grants? I wasn't sure what you were saying there.
I think I'll still recommend, because we have the ability to move it later in the year, that we reserve. I would shoot for 50% of what we have. Keep that, put that in the budget line item for grants, because they're matched at greater than 50%. So you get private dollar investment for more than for every dollar you put in a grant.
Okay,
so it's not a giveaway.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask next. I didn't understand the grant thing. So I have to put $1 in, and then you get $1 from the city?
I believe it's a minimum 50% match, isn't it?
Correct, a minimum 50% match, and it's reimbursement.
And typically, we
You
see
have to
more than
spend
50.
Okay.
You know, we get more than dollar
No, I
for
understand
dollar.
that. Yeah,
So-
okay. All
So
right,
but at the same time, I personally would take the streets off, the concrete over there. But I liked the idea of doing sidewalk infill, the solar. I would just bump those numbers down to allow us to leave 50%. That would be my only urging.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
The top of my list remains some sort of lighting. The grant is important to me, and that's right near the top as well. And any discussion I've had on that, I don't want anyone coming to us and not, you know, it's hard to answer the question when they come to you and say, well, we're out. So whatever we can do to keep that going, I think that that's a perpetual benefit to us. And I obviously like the matching part as that as well. Sidewalks are important to me as well, and it kind of goes back a little bit in that area to the lighting. You know, we've got some dim lighting and some bad sidewalks, and that's not good. And Member Jordan and I both are probably struggling walking in the street at night. But that being said, the question was asked earlier, do we know how much enhanced lighting will cost? We don't, was the answer. So how do I put this into my part of the voting when I'm looking for enhanced lighting, but there's no way we know how much that's going to be, and we vote tonight?
We have budgeted some money for the enhanced lighting, and I don't have it at the top of my head. I would have to go back and get a file out of my office, so.
I don't want to do that to you, but at the same time, being that it's at the top of my list and enhanced lighting is important to, and again, I go back to, and I think we're all up here, what are we hearing from our people? Some are hearing handicap parking. I'm hearing it's dark down there, and we have some rough sidewalks. I'd like to do something to show that we're remedying that in some way. So that's where I'm at. Again, if we had some kind of cost on enhanced lighting, and I know you're looking to do that, and I appreciate that.
We're
I'd feel
going
more
to go
comfortable.
get something for you, hopefully.
Thank you.
Busaka just left to do that, I think. Sure, no problem. Member Ball, you still have your light on? Is there something, or did you cover it already? We got it. Okay, thank you. Member Stokel?
I was just going to give us some numbers while they're getting that. So if we do the half for grants, that would be $85,302. And then if we do the $17,000 for solar, that will leave us for sidewalk infill and potential for lighting, $68,302, which I'm hoping will be enough to give us a good chunk for sidewalk and lighting. So I guess we'll find out, but I think I see us being on consensus on that.
Member Nelson? Well, she gave us the options at this point.
Well, I'm sort of disagreeing with you, Sarah. I'm sort of thinking, sorry,
No.
17,000 for the solar, and then I agree with the lighting. I didn't even think about the lighting, but the lighting is not good down there. And the rest of it splitting between the sidewalks, the grants, and the lighting.
And what would-
Uh,
do you have those
One
numbers
third,
worked
one
out?
third, one third.
So lowering the grant, instead of doing the half,
Yeah,
lowering the
do.
grant.
Which would be, I think Scott said 51.
Yeah, it would be 51 something.
So 51 for each of those.
I guess,
Because, you know,
Jolene, I couldn't hear you. What?
I'm sorry. It would be, okay, we're going to get the lighting. What I was saying was, let's do 17,000 for the solar, and then 1/3, which would be 51,000 for the sidewalk, 1/3 for the grant, which would be 51, and then up to 1/3 for the lighting, which I guess we have a number on now.
Yes, we had budgeted, and this was just in changing the wattage. And as you recall, Kevin had mentioned about FP&L is changing things out to LED. But we had budgeted $5,000 just to increase the wattage of the bulbs in the FPL lights.
Is that an advisable move? As much as I want lighting, if it's coming in LED in the next 2 months or
Well,
6 months?
My understanding is this is a statewide initiative by FP&L, and we do not know what time. It could be 2 months, it could be years.
So $5,000 will increase the wattage in what lights?
And that was basically that would be all of Main Street and more. We'd have a little bit more, but basically we're concentrating on Main Street and the trail area.
Do we feel that the increased wattage, and I haven't gone out and done a study and counted, but do we think an increased wattage is adequate, or do we need more lights?
I don't know.
Why?
Well, what if we?
Yeah, without a
No, I'm good, I'm good.
study.
I would definitely be for the increased wattage, and clearly that's a very small amount compared to what we're talking about. So I would be for that, and I would do whatever I could, as long as I can, to continue to increase the light down there.
5,000. So this would be my suggestion.
Wait 1 second, Member Jordan? is
I'm
next.
sorry.
No, I'll let her talk.
You go right ahead.
You go right ahead, young lady.
Well, what I was going to say is, why don't we put 51,000 in the budget for additional lighting and ask staff to come back to us with some recommendations on what we could do with that 51,000 to increase the lighting downtown, because it is dark and you can't see anything.
I'm okay with that if we can say lighting or potentially come back to us for something else, should it not be that much.
Right.
So I don't want
Right.
to spend it if we don't need it, but yes, I'm okay with that,
Yeah.
if that's the case.
So that would be my motion.
Would you repeat it, please? So, with the numbers.
With the numbers, okay. So my motion would be that we spend 17,000 on the additional solar system, that we spend $51,000 toward the sidewalk infill, that we put $51,000 into the grant program, and that we put $51,000 toward lighting, and we asked staff to come back with recommendations on lighting downtown, with the idea that if the lighting doesn't cost that much, we can use it for something else.
Can we call that motion or not?
I was going to call it a motion.
That's a motion.
So, ma'am,
That's a second.
we will
You got
come
a
back to the CRA board with the recommendation on where the lights should go.
Okay.
Yes.
And then with the LED enhancements, I think we're just going to say they're going to happen. So what we're looking for is some dark
Right. areas
that we can enhance with that amount of money. And we'll come back to you with that plan and let you know how much it costs.
Okay.
You got it in there already.
We're under discussion?
We've got it. I've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
No, wait a minute, there's another light up there. Remember,
I didn't even
Paul
press
was
the little
next now.
button. Yeah,
You took your.
go
light
ahead,
off.
young man.
I think that's a real good compromise, and I'm
Yeah.
glad to see, that's all we're trying to do is balance it. There's not enough money to do everything we'd like to do. The only thing, and I'm going to vote for it, that I would ask staff, because I had this question, I'll forget if I don't ask it, is there a mapping of the sidewalk infill? I mean, have you guys already prioritized? I think just for my information, probably everybody's, we'd like to see where those dollars are going to go.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Member Jordan.
Thank you, sir. What I really like to see is, and I heard you say you'll come back and tell us where the lighting is going to be. My big thing is consistency. Whatever lighting, I know you're going to change the bulbs out for wattage, but if we find other areas, I just like for us to have some kind of consistent lighting down there. Of course, LED lighting. So not just putting something here and there, but just try to create a theme when it comes down to lighting, for sure. All right, thank you.
Member Leedy?
Yeah, I had a question for Member Nelson that on the motion was somewhere I got lost along the way, but 51,000 is going to lighting, and they're going to come back next time. But my question is, they have a solution right now for $5,000. Should they? Don't wait. I mean.
Oh,
That's already budgeted.
Okay, so that's not, it's 51 over the
Additional.
$5,000, right?
Right.
Yeah.
5,000 is already budgeted. Correct.
And can we do that right now?
It's done.
It's in the process. We have to coordinate with FP&L to change the light bulbs, and I think our priority area was Main Street.
So just if I could add, if you want to see what LED lighting is, when we replace the light poles in the Commons parking lot, so when you leave tonight, if you'd go past the Commons parking lot on the backside, those are LED, and you can see how much enhanced it is. It's a lot brighter.
Member Stokel.
Yep, just before voting, I wanted to clarify the motion. Should the lighting not be 51,000, we may come back and reassess and use that money for something else. Okay, I'm good.
Okay, wait a minute. I want to see this. It is very important in my mind that we do.
You're recognized, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr.
That's
Mayor.
all right.
I apologize for that. I'm new. I can do that. I really want to make sure that if we got $51,000 that we can do in lighting for the CRA area, then we need to find areas that are dark and use it for that. We need to enhance the walkability and everything. I really, since we do have a budget for it, I want us to use it because I don't want us to come back a year from now and say, we need more lighting.
No, I agree. I'm just saying, should FPL come and do this and we find that I don't want to say, oh, yeah, now we're stuck doing this because we had voted for it and we're not able to come back as a CRA board and use it for more sidewalk, for instance. I just wanted it to be in there for that.
I appreciate that.
I agree.
Okay, I'm glad you agree.
I think that is kind of the procedure we would go through anyway, right? Yeah, so we don't really need that in the motion. They understand that. So who we got next? Still Member Stokel? Okay. Any further discussion?
go quick.
Go quick. I agree. Any further discussion? Not hearing any? All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Same sign. Passed unanimously. Thank you. Next item, where am I? CRA, petitions and requests from the public. Are there any petitions from the public that would like to speak at this point? Ma'am? Petitions from the public. If you'd like to speak on a non-agenda item, you may. Okay. Executive Director's report.
Yes, sir, just an update on the capital projects and ongoing projects. And there is a workshop coming up on the 17th of December here in City Hall, where FDOT is going to talk about their proposed plan for the Trail Gap Connector on 406.
Okay. Anything else, sir?
No, sir.
Anybody have any remarks that they'd like to make at this point? Not seeing any. I'll adjourn this meeting. We will reconvene at 10 of.